The first time he raised his voice at me, I dropped a plate. It didn't shatter, it just spun on the floorboards, spinning and spinning, while he stood over me with his face gone red, a Bible lying open on the table behind him, explaining to me exactly what a wife was supposed to be. I was 19, we'd been married 4 months, and I remember the thought that came to me, clear and calm as still water. This is the rest of my life. At our wedding, the bishop had told us a husband leads and a wife follows. I just hadn't understood yet what that word, lead, was actually going to mean once the door of our house closed behind us. Stay with me because what I'm about to describe, what Amish husbands are permitted to do to wives who step out of line, is going to unsettle you. And if you were raised somewhere that taught you obedience was just another word for love, some of it may feel uncomfortably familiar. Before I get into 8 years of that marriage, let me introduce myself. My name is Martha, and this is Hannah the Amish Girl, the channel where I tell the stories my community never allowed me to say out loud. I grew up Old Order Amish in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and I spent 8 years inside an Amish marriage before I found my way out of it. If you want more truth from behind the prayer cap, subscribe and hit like. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, I read every one. And if you want the deeper version of this story, the full Amish Insider Guide is linked below. Here's something that took me years after leaving to fully understand. In the Amish world, a husband's authority isn't a suggestion, a preference, or a personality trait. It's theology. It's the load-bearing wall of the entire household. The Ordnung, our unwritten code, spells it out without ever needing to say it aloud. The husband is the head. The wife is the helper. He answers to the bishop. She answers to him. There is no chain of appeal that doesn't run straight through her husband first, and here's the part outsiders never grasp. Correcting a wife isn't classified as abuse in that world. It's classified as discipline, as love, even as a husband fulfilling his sacred duty before God to keep order in his own home. So when a wife steps out of line, and stepping out of line could mean anything from raising her voice at a family meal, to questioning how the farm's money gets spent, to pinning her prayer cap slightly askew, the husband isn't merely allowed to correct her. He's expected to. I married Jonas in late November. I was 18. He was 24. Our courtship had lasted less than a year, and I believed I knew him. He was quiet at the Singjings, respectful to my father, a hard worker on his family's dairy farm. Those first months of marriage had their own clumsy tenderness, two people learning each other's rhythms. But somewhere around the 4th month something shifted. I'd bought a different brand of flour at the store, nothing fancy, just a few cents cheaper than our usual. When I mentioned it at supper, he set his fork down, slow and deliberate. "I decide what comes into this house," he said. "Not you." He didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. The look on his face alone had me apologizing before I even understood what I was apologizing for. That was the first lesson. The corrections were rarely loud, especially not at first. They were quiet, certain, immovable. A wife who argued was prideful, a wife who explained herself was rebellious. A wife who cried was manipulating him. There was no shape my feelings could take that hadn't already been pre-labeled as sin. By the 2nd year, the list of rules had multiplied on its own. I couldn't visit my own mother without clearing it with him first. I couldn't seal a letter without him reading it. I couldn't keep the money I earned selling eggs at our roadside stand. That went straight into his hand, and he decided what, if anything, came back to me. Let me walk you through what correction actually looks like inside an Amish home, because the word covers far more ground than outsiders ever see. The first layer is verbal. He recites scripture at you, verses about submission, about silence, about the woman deceived in the garden. Read aloud at the kitchen table while you stand there listening. He never has to shout. The Bible does the work a raised voice would do anywhere else. The second layer is withdrawal. He stops speaking to you. For days, sometimes weeks, he eats what you cook without meeting your eyes. He sleeps with his back to you. He moves through rooms as though you simply aren't in them. In a world where a woman's entire sense of self is bound up in her household, being erased by your own husband is its own slow form of starvation. The third layer is restriction. He decides you won't attend next Sunday's service. He decides you're not going to your sister's quilting bee. He decides the buggy stays in the barn. You become a prisoner inside a house you scrubbed spotless with your own 2 hands. The fourth layer is the one that makes outsiders go quiet. Physical. I want to be honest, it doesn't happen in every home, but it happens in enough of them that every Amish woman I've ever known has either lived it herself or knows the woman 2 farms over who has. In my house, it started in year 3. I'd bought fabric for a new dress without asking, plain blue, the same shade I always wore but unauthorized all the same. He gripped my wrist hard enough to leave a mark. "You don't buy without my word," he said. The mark faded in 4 days. I told no one. The next time it was my upper arm. The time after that he shoved me into the kitchen counter, and the bruise on my hip stayed a sickly yellow for 2 weeks. And in between all of it were the long, quiet stretches where he was gentle, where he held my hand at night, where he said grace over supper like he meant every word. I'd think, maybe it's over now. Maybe he's changed. Maybe I finally learned what he needed from me. That's the part nobody warns you about. It isn't the cruelty that keeps you there. It's the kindness sandwiched in between. I need you to understand something about my community, because it matters more than any single bruise. When a wife is being corrected harshly, the community does not step in. Not because no one notices, they notice everything. Our world is small, the walls are thin, neighbors see, sisters see, mothers see. But stepping between a husband and his God-given authority is something no one, especially no woman, would ever dare. My own mother saw the mark on my wrist that first summer. She looked at it, she looked at me. "Jonas works hard," she said. "You must be patient with him." Then she changed the subject to the green beans we were canning. That was as close as anyone in my life ever came to acknowledging what was happening to me. If you want the deeper version of everything I'm describing here, the full Amish Insider Guide is linked below. There's technically a process for a wife who can't bear what's happening in her own home. It isn't divorce. Divorce doesn't exist for us. It's going to the bishop. I did it once at 24. With a bruise on my collarbone I'd hidden under my dress for a week. I sat in his parlor on a hard wooden chair and told him, in the most careful words I could assemble, that my husband was a hard man to live with. The bishop wasn't cruel, I want to be fair about that. He was a man who believed exactly what he'd been raised to believe, the same doctrine Jonas had been raised on. He listened, he nodded, he folded his hands. Then he told me that a wife's submission was the soil a husband's gentleness grew out of, and that if Jonas was hard with me, I ought to look first at my own heart. Had I been a proper helper to him? Had I been quiet? Had I been willing? I went home that afternoon. Jonas already knew where I'd been, the bishop had told him. That night was the worst of our whole marriage. I won't describe it. I'll only say I understood, for the first time, that the bishop wasn't a door leading out. He was one more lock. My friend Rebecca was married to a deacon named Amish, respected in the church, the kind of man who prayed long and loud over every meal. She showed up at my kitchen table one afternoon in year 6 of my marriage, still wearing her bonnet, and said, "Martha, I think I'm going to die in that house." Amish women don't cry in front of each other, not even in trouble like that. We just sat. I poured her coffee. She drank it. After a long while she asked, "Do you know anyone who's left?" "I know one," I told her. "A girl named Anna, from over near Intercourse. Left 2 years back. They say she's in Lancaster City now, working in a bakery." We sat with that a long time before she finally asked, "Do you ever think about it?" "Every day," I said. It was the first time I'd said those words aloud to another living soul, including myself. Saying them broke something open, and it built something else in its place. By year 7, I'd started hiding a small jar of money behind a loose board in the 3rd stall of the barn. Egg money, sewing money, coins I could shave off the household budget without him noticing. I had no plan, just a jar. Some weeks I dropped in $2, some weeks 50 cents. That jar wasn't a plan, it was a prayer I didn't have the words to say out loud. By the end of that year it held nearly $300. By the middle of year 8, close to 500, I didn't know where I'd go, or who would help me. I only knew that jar was mine in a life where nothing else was. The night I finally left, Jonas threw a coffee mug at the wall behind my head. It shattered, and a shard cut a small line beneath my eye. "Look what you made me do," he said, and went to bed. I stood in that kitchen a long time with blood drying on my cheek, and I knew the way you know a season has turned for good. I packed one bag, I pulled the jar out of the barn. I walked 4 miles in the dark to the phoned shanty at the edge of our district and dialed the only number I'd memorized. A woman in Lancaster City, a former Amish woman, the same Anna we'd once whispered about at my kitchen table, answered on the second ring. "Where are you?" she asked. I told her, "I'm coming." She said, "Stay right there." The shunning came fast after that. My parents' door closed. My sisters mailed my letters back unopened. The bishop sent word through a neighbor that I was no longer welcome at any service in any district recognizing our church. Jonas told the whole community I'd been seduced by the outside world, that I'd abandoned my vows, chosen pride over God. I lost nearly everyone I'd ever known. I lost the language I was raised inside. I lost the rhythm of a calendar that had marked every year of my life until then. What I gained took longer to name. A small room above a bakery in Lancaster City. A dishwashing job that paid $6 an hour. A therapist who used words I'd never once heard before, coercion, isolation, trauma bond. Sitting in her office, I learned that what had happened to me in my own home had a name out here in the wider world, and that name was not marriage. There's a moment I still think about. About a year after I left, I was walking past a hardware store downtown, and there was a young English woman in the window, holding up paint swatches, simply choosing a color, for a wall, in a room that belonged to her. I stood on that sidewalk and watched her until I had to sit down on a bench and cry, because I was 28 years old and had never once, in my entire life, chosen the color of anything. Not a wall, not a dress, not a single shape of my own life. My therapist told me something that week I've never once forgotten. Martha, she said, control almost never introduces itself as control. It nearly always shows up wearing the clothes of love. I turn that sentence over in my mind almost daily, because it's the one truth nobody inside my old world could ever bring themselves to say aloud. What happened to me wasn't the work of a monster. It was the work of an ordinary man, raised by ordinary parents, inside an ordinary church, every one of them convinced they were doing something holy. I don't hate the world I came from. I want to say that plainly, because it's true. That world gave me a work ethic that's carried me through every difficult year since. It gave me a faith I've slowly rebuilt on my own terms. It gave me sisters and a mother whose face I still see clearly whenever I close my eyes. But that same world also handed me 8 years of a marriage where my body wasn't mine, my money wasn't mine, my voice wasn't mine, and where the God who was supposed to love me got used instead as a key to lock every door in the house. There is no theology on earth that requires a woman to be afraid in her own kitchen. No scripture that consecrates her bruises as obedience. No faithful husband whose faithfulness depends on his wife staying silent. If you were raised somewhere that called obedience love, called fear respect, called your own smallness a virtue, I see you. You weren't weak and you weren't foolish. You were a woman trying to survive a system built to make survival look like sin. Tell me in the comments what part of this stayed with you. Tell me your own story, if you're ready to. If you want to go further, the full Amish Insider Guide is linked below. And if you want more truth from behind the prayer cap, subscribe to Hannah the Amish Girl. There's still so much I haven't said. Until next time, choose your freedoms wisely. They might just be the thing that saves you.